What's going on, guys? It's your boy Jordan Richards back again for the Dynasty Stock Watch for Week 12 on Mayo Media Network. Please be sure to drop this video a like if you like it and drop a comment below of some of the questions you may have for me. I'll jump into the comments throughout this week and we can talk some more Dynasty buys and sells. Of course, subscribe to Mayo Media Network for all of the great content that Pat Mayo and friends put out each and every week. Without further ado, let's get into the players that I want to talk about this week. I'm going to talk some disrespected wide receivers right now, some guys that aren't getting enough love in the Dynasty community, some guys that I think are much better than their stock is saying as far as their value goes in the community. And so let's dive into it. First, I want to talk about Keenan Allen, the wide receiver for the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, obviously, we've seen Keenan Allen be an absolute beast this season, but what people are forgetting is that he's not as bad and as old as you think he is. Yes, he went through his injuries early in his career, but he is currently on pace to be a wide receiver one again after we continuously disrespected him all offseason because Justin Herbert's not his quarterback, Tyrod Taylor, this, that, whatever. Stop. Just stop the disrespect. Keenan Allen is a wide receiver one year in, year out. He just got a contract extension with the Chargers. He's leading the NFL right now in targets, and while I don't expect that defense to be as bad as it's been, I do expect it to continue to be very good throughout the next few years with Justin Herbert at the helm. Hopefully improve that running game, get Austin Eckler back for the entire season next year. Continue to build around Justin Herbert, build up that offensive line, build that defense. It's only going to mean more scoring opportunities for this offense. And with how good Justin Herbert's looked, how could you possibly be selling Keenan Allen right now? He's one of the best wide receivers in football. He's one of the best route technicians. That's not a skill that just deteriorates over time. He doesn't win with athleticism. He wins with talent. And that's why I want to be buying Keenan Allen right now. If people are selling him on a discount simply because they think he's old, he's going to start regressing, I would be buying him up and riding him into the sunset, because I do believe that tied to Justin Herbert, he could be a viable fantasy asset for the next 3 to 4 years as a wide receiver one, as a wide receiver two, and that's going to be valuable for your fantasy teams. And when people are selling these players at discounts, those are the kind of guys that I want to go and get. They're not as flashy as some of the younger guys. They're not as flashy as the Chase Claypools, the Deontay Johnsons, the Justin Jeffersons, the CeeDee Lambs, but he's still a very talented player and a player that you're going to want on your team. A guy who's already seen over 110 targets on the season through 10 games and still has plenty more in the tank going forward. I love Keenan Allen. I love what I've seen of Justin Herbert. I love this offense right now. Now, I do expect him to run a little bit more in the coming years. It's not going to matter for Keenan Allen. He's been a target hog before, and he's going to continue to be a target hog going forward. So stock is way up for Keenan Allen. I still think you can get Keenan Allen in kind of the teens, like just past the 10-11 range as far as wide receiver goes. You're probably still in good shape. Even if you draft him as a wide receiver one, I do think there's still lots of room to grow. As we've seen, he's basically a top 5 wide receiver this year. He could easily be a top 5 wide receiver next year. And while there's a lot of talent at wide receiver, Keenan Allen's going to be a guy who gets the volume, even if the touchdowns aren't always there, for a very consistent floor week to week. Now, the second guy I want to talk about is a guy who's a little bit more polarizing this season. We saw him change teams, and that's Robbie Anderson, wide receiver for the Carolina Panthers. Robbie Anderson is a very talented wide receiver, but in the previous years, the problem was we only saw him as a deep threat. He was only used to stretch the field, and so he suffered from very low catch percentages and lack of volume. But now in Carolina, he's third in the NFL in targets right now, and why wouldn't you want that guy on your team? Currently in startup drafts, he's being drafted in ADP at wide receiver 40, which is insane. He's a top 12 wide receiver with over 90 targets. The one issue for Robbie Anderson right now, it's his lack of touchdowns. If he had 5 touchdowns on the season, he'd be a top 6 wide receiver, and no one would really be questioning his ability to get it done week to week. The only reason why people have those questions is because of those touchdowns. He's kind of having a Robert Woods season that he had last year, where Robert Woods was, I believe, wide receiver 14, but he only had 2 touchdowns. If you were to give him 5, 6 touchdowns, he would have been a middling wide receiver 1 and had much higher value going into this season. But again, those lack of touchdowns are not going to be sticky. It's not something you want to bank on year over year. With certain players like Calvin Ridley and others like I'll talk about later, you can kind of bank on that. They have those opportunities. But with Robbie Anderson, you're banking on the value in his targets. All those targets have value, every single one. He's great after the catch. He's seeing lots of targets, seeing tons of volume, and most importantly, his catch percentage is up over 20% compared to his career average. He's catching over 75% of the passes thrown his way compared to his previous 55, 56% for his career when he was on the Jets. That's a massive improvement. That's the offense. That's the way he's being utilized. He's a player who's going to get it done for you week in and week out in fantasy simply because of the volume alone. And I would be buying Robbie Anderson even at wide receiver 40. You get him as a wide receiver 3. He's probably producing like a wide receiver 2 at minimum for you. Even throughout the season. He's only 27 years old right now. That's along the lines of Mike Evans and Michael Thomas. These aren't guys you want to trade away. I get it's only 1 year of production, so you're not too sure, but this offense is going to be good for a long time. They're going to throw the ball a lot. They're not going to lean on that running game, and that defense is still going to be bad. They can try and build it up over the years in Carolina, but I don't expect them to change their philosophy. They like to dink and dunk it, move the ball slowly, and that provides a lot of opportunity for Robbie Anderson, Curtis Samuel, and DJ Moore going forward. But when DJ Moore is drafted at wide receiver 12 and Robbie Anderson is drafted at wide receiver 40, that's a value gap I just can't be a part of. And honestly, to that point, even looking at Robert Woods, he's drafted at wide receiver 35, and he just went off yesterday for a ton of yards, ton of targets. But again, it's the touchdowns of Robert Woods like we saw last season. If he gets the touchdowns, he's probably a middling wide receiver 1. If he doesn't, he's still going to be a high-end wide receiver 2 to a low-end wide receiver 1. And those are guys that are going to be valuable every single season. They may not see the insane ceilings that you see out of some guys or the insane touchdown numbers, but they're going to be consistent. They're going to be good for your fantasy team, and they're guys you're going to want on your rosters. So go ahead and get Robbie Anderson. Go and get Robert Woods if people can still sell them at a discount. Go and get Cooper Kupp, because all these guys do have value, and they're seriously undervalued in fantasy right now, especially when they have down games and they're a little bit inconsistent like we've seen. Now, the last guy I want to talk about is Mapletron, Chase Claypool, the wide receiver for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Pittsburgh Steelers, like we've seen, Claypool has been an excellent wide receiver so far, but it seems like a lot of his value is predicated on his touchdowns. The first wide receiver in NFL history to have 10 touchdowns in his first 10 games. That is insane. That is something that you cannot sustain every single year. But yet, I'm starting to believe there is an opportunity for Claypool to do that. I mentioned Calvin Ridley previously because Calvin Ridley has a career touchdown rate of over 8%. And that's not over 1 or 2 seasons. This is his 3rd season. He's still sustaining that same touchdown rate that he saw in his rookie year, that he saw in his sophomore year. And so I'm starting to think that maybe just the way the Steelers choose to use Claypool, that touchdown rate is sustainable. Right now, he's being drafted as about wide receiver 22 overall, and I do see a lot of room to grow. And while I don't view him as the wide receiver 1, in my opinion, that's Deontay Johnson. We've seen Ben Roethlisberger be able to support multiple wide receiver 1s like he has in multiple games this season, where we've seen him support Deontay, Juju, and Claypool as wide receiver 1s on the week. I do expect Claypool to get much better. He's still a very raw talent, but we've seen him show very well in this offense. And people who are going to say, well, what if he regresses in touchdowns? He's still on pace for over 105 targets this season. That is an insane number for any wide receiver, any rookie wide receiver, especially in the NFL. That's something I want to bank on. Like we talked about with DK Metcalf, he's a guy who saw over 90 targets last year. He kind of became the wide receiver 1 in Seattle. Now he's on pace for even more than that. But with Claypool, for a rookie to come in this season, start off slow, be a bit inconsistent. Then we're talking about Deontay Johnson getting injured. So that's kind of the excuse for Claypool getting more targets. And then it's, well, Juju's not playing very well. But now, the past 3 games, he's seen over 8 targets in his past 4 games. He has 3 touchdowns in his last 2 games. It's still all working for Claypool, and he's still going to be a very good wide receiver in the NFL. I think you need to try and get him if you can. If you have to trade a first-round pick and a second-round pick, it's something I'd be willing to consider, because I do think Claypool is that good, and there still is value to be had in that offense. And like I talked about previously, if Juju does end up switching teams, that's going to open up a lot more opportunity for Claypool in the offense, and an area where I really think he can thrive, because he'll be an even larger focal point of the offense, whether Deontay's in or out. He's starting to have a bit of an injury history, getting banged up over the years, where Claypool has been a stud. He's been in the lineup every single week. He's been getting opportunity. He has Ben's trust, especially deep down the field, and I do expect that to continue even into next season. For a rookie to be playing this well, you have to be trying to get those players. Like we talk about with Justin Jefferson, like we talk about with CeeDee Lamb. He's not quite in their talent level, and so I don't want to put him there, but I do think he's not as far behind him as people may think right now. And so with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to drop this video a like, drop a comment below with some of the things you want to talk about for Dynasty, and I'll go in there and answer some of your questions. Until next week, follow me on Twitter at @YourBoyJRich, and I am out.